The killings of the civilians in an anti-insurgency operation by the Indian Army in Nagaland has caused widespread outrage, and the focus is once again back on this troubled state. Nagaland continues to witness one of the longest and bloodiest standing insurgencies, one that has existed longer than the Kashmir insurgency. The political dispute has spanned over 6 decades, and to understand it, it is important to understand the ethnicity, culture, history, geography and demography of the Naga tribes. We explain this conflict. The various tribes of the state of Nagaland and its neighboring regions who have been connected to the state are collectively called the Nagas. Some of the prominent Naga tribes are the Konyaks, popularly called the Headhunters, Ao, Rengma, Zeliang, Angami and Chang. Their languages are different, however, they belong to the Sino-Tibetan group of languages. Nagaland is one of the smallest states in India, bordered by the state of Assam to the west, shares a very important border with Arunachal Pradesh to the north, and then Manipur to the south and Myanmar to the east. Now that we have established a basic understanding about the Nagas and the geography of the place, let's understand how the conflict started. The British took over Assam in 1826, and in 1881 the Naga Hills too became a part of British India. The Naga Hills, reaching a height of around 3,000 meters, lies on the border of India and Burma, now known as Myanmar. The Nagas accused the British of having betrayed them, leaving their fate in the hands of India and Myanmar. The state of Nagaland was divided into 2 administrative areas, one half under India and another under Myanmar. Nagas say that this partition was so indiscriminate that the house of the Ang, the king in the Longwa village, was said to be partitioned, with his bedroom in India and his kitchen in Myanmar. Interestingly, the Longwa village is also known as the village with 2 countries. The first sign of Naga resistance was seen in the formation of the Naga Club in 1918, which told the Simon Commission in 1929 to leave them alone to determine their future for themselves. In 1946 came the Naga National Council, or NNC, which under the leadership of Angami Zapu Fizo declared Nagaland an independent state on August 14, 1947. The NNC resolved to establish a sovereign Naga state and conducted a referendum in 1951 in which 99% supported an independent Nagaland. In 1952, Zapu established the Naga federal government and the Naga federal army. This was met with a military response by the Indian government, and AFSPA was enacted in the region. But what is AFSPA? The Armed Forces Special Powers Act, or the AFSPA 1958, is an act of the Parliament of India that grants special powers to the Indian Armed Forces to maintain public order in disturbed areas in the state of Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland and Tripura. This is precisely what happened in Nagaland in the recent incident. A special unit of the army was on an operation targeting Naga insurgents, apparently based on credible intelligence, and reportedly killed civilians in place of them. In the 1950s and 60s, especially after the enactment of AFSPA, many of the Naga army's cadres were arrested and killed. Now that we have understood the act, let's go back to understanding the conflict. Still deeply affected by the violent partition of its northern reaches, Indian leaders were against any further partitioning of the country, which compounded the plight of the Naga independence struggle. In 1963, the government of India created the state of Nagaland, before which it was a district of Assam. Between 1964 and 68, a peace mission attempted to reach a solution that would be acceptable to all stakeholders, but it too fell through. In the 1970s, a dialogue was initiated to resolve the issue, and in 1976, the Shillong Accord was signed. The Shillong Accord was an agreement signed between the Government of India and the Naga Federal Government, or the Naga rebels, to accept the supremacy of the Constitution of India without condition, surrender their arms and renounce their demand for the succession of Nagaland from India. However, the accord was rejected by prominent NNC leaders since they were not ready to accept complete Indian sovereignty. Another organization calling themselves the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, or the NSCN, was formed in Myanmar region in 1980. It has two factions, NSCN-K and NSCN-IM. The NSCN-IM wants a separate flag and constitution. And more importantly, they insist on the creation of a greater Nagaland, a homeland that includes larger swaths of Arunachal Pradesh, Assam and Manipur. A demand that is obviously unacceptable to those states. For over a decade, starting in 1997, the government entered into ceasefire agreements with key groups, each time sparking hopes of a settlement. The most significant was the Shillong Accord in 1976, which quickly fell apart. In 2015, the NSCN-K unilaterally cancelled the agreement and joined forces with a number of other extremist groups in the northeast. A faction of this group, headed by Yung Ong and based in Myanmar, has since been implicated in a number of incidents of violence. In fact, the army was on the hunt for members of this group on the 4th of December 2021 and killed the civilians instead.